and welcome to this Courageous Heart Community Book Study. We are so excited that you're joining us with this to go through this book with Lindsey Hale, and it's Lifted, and How to Ditch the Fear, Obligation, and Guilt and Live Your Best Life. Lindsey, I'm super excited that you're here today with me for the study, and I'm also super thankful that you wrote the book and you just put your heart on the page, and I really appreciate that. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
For people who are maybe just joining us for the first time or they haven't read the book yet, can you just introduce yourself a little bit, let people know who you are and why you wrote Lifted?
Yeah, so I am married to my high school sweetheart. We've been together since we were 16 years old. We've known each other since we were fourth or fifth grade. It's
Wow.
crazy. We have 5 kids. I always say I have 4 kids and a baby. I had a little surprise join our family in November, and I'm a top leader with 31 gifts, and I lead a team of about 5,000 women.
Awesome.
And yeah, it's crazy. So I found myself teaching the same things over and over in my business. I'm really coaching women, not just in business, but in life, because 31 is a direct selling company. So a lot of what we do is working from home. So I found myself just teaching people the same things over and over and over. And so I initially started writing this book to be a tool for them. And, but it's not a direct selling book. It's a book about life and relationships, because that's what I'm mostly training people on. I feel like if you can get faith in life and relationships right, then business comes easily too. So, and I also really felt like the more I talked to people totally thought that I had it all together. And I was like, oh my gosh, you have it all wrong.
Yeah.
I do not have it all together. I am learning right alongside of you. And so I wanted to really put down on paper for a tool so that people could see the journey of what it looks like to become successful to everybody else, I guess.
Okay. That idea that everybody thinks you have it all together, I think that is, not hilarious that they think you have it all together, but that idea that we all think that about other people, that we look at other people and we think, oh, she's got it together. And I actually interviewed Maria Shriver one time for a magazine article that I wrote. And she said something very similar, that people, we all look at each other and we think we have it together, or they have it together and we don't. I'm like, really? You struggle with that too? It's universal. I think everybody has that feeling. So
yeah, absolutely. I think that's true too. I first started noticing that I would go to the gym, and years ago, I was quite a bit heavier than I am now. And I was on this weight loss journey in the very beginning. And I would go to the gym and I would see these girls who were fit. And I would think to myself, the story I would say to myself is, she's so lucky. She just has that. Like, she was born that way. But once I would start talking to the women at the gym, I was like, oh my goodness, she started just like I did. Or maybe she even started at a different place than me. And this is where she's ended up. And all I'm seeing is the after. I didn't see or walk through that journey. And so I think that is so true about every process in life. I actually heard Justin Timberlake say that one time, that people always say to him, you're so talented. And he's like, actually, I'm not that talented. I just work really hard.
Really hard. Yeah. That's it. That's it. Or that whole idea of the overnight success. And really, it took 20 years to be the overnight success. You're just, the other people are just now noticing. You're like, I put in a lot of hours.
Yep.
So totally true. Totally true. So we've already started on this whole getting real thing, but that's where I want to start with this. So were you afraid ever to share your story on the page? It's a whole book and people are reading it. So were you ever afraid of that?
Gosh. Yes. That was actually the worst part. To be honest, the initial writing of the book was actually an amazing experience. It was really freeing. It was like therapy. There were tears shed as I was writing, and I would wake up feeling really renewed. And so that part was really fun. And then there was kind of like that season of just the busyness of it, trying to figure out, okay, how do I get the book published? How do I find an editor? How do I do all of that stuff? So then that was the busy part. And then it was like the month before we were going to publish it. And I was like, oh my gosh, I actually think I probably told you I wasn't really sure I should finish. Are you sure about this? Should we do this? Do I really want everybody to see that I don't have it all together. So I found myself actually going back and rereading what I had wrote to remind myself. It was like Satan was all over me during that time of just trying to doubt me. Like, I was just struggling so much with the fear, obligation, and guilt of literally everything. I was having relationship struggles. I was struggling with my relationship with my dad again, which you'll read later on about that. I was struggling at home. I was struggling with my addiction to social media again. It was like everything. And it was like all these questions of, are you really qualified? Did God really tell you to write this book? And so I had to go back and revisit everything I had written down. They say, there's that saying, like, I wrote the book on that.
Yeah.
Say that for a reason.
Yeah.
It's not because we have it all figured out. It's because we literally have to figure it out all the time. Like, I wrote the book on that because I constantly need that reminder of.
Yeah. It's a lesson that you need to learn for yourself too. I mean, that's it. That's what I find with a lot of writing is that when I write, or a lot of the authors that we work with, it's because there's a lesson that they needed to learn themselves and they wrote a book about it, because that process, I mean, it just helps you really internalize it and think, okay, this is me, this is who I want to be, and this is how we're going to get there. And you have to keep going back to what you want, as opposed to those lies that Satan whispers in our ears. And, yeah. Did he really say? I mean, doesn't that sound familiar?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. It's exactly where it all started, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
So that whole idea that, as we start this study, I really want people to understand that that we're not looking at this as the experts. Even you who wrote the book on it, you're not looking at it as like, I know it all, I never have to deal with it again. The reality is that fog builds up and creeps in over and over again, and we have to intentionally break free from it. So it's not a one and done. And I think people need to see that, because it's okay if you mess up, you just get back up and you get going again. So
yeah, what the book really does, honestly, is it opens your eyes to it, right? So you're made more aware of it. So when I was going through that, instead of getting so buried in that fog and feeling that that weight of it and just trying to navigate my way through, I started to recognize it quicker. And I think that the more quickly you can recognize it, the more quickly you can pull yourself out of it.
Yeah.
You can practice some of the things that are in the book, and I could say to myself, well, what was I doing when I wasn't feeling this way? What is the thought process that's gotten me to this fear place? And how can I get out of it? And so that's really what the book is supposed to do, is be that constant reminder. And like I said, I have to sometimes go and revisit what I wrote. And sometimes I'll read it and be like, God must have called me to do this, because that was really smart. Did I really write that? I can't believe I wrote that, because I forgot that. So,
and he's helped you along the way to get that message out. And I think that's it. We'll talk about in another thing about, us having assignments, and we have a purpose. And I think part of your purpose is sharing your story, because I think it has helped people already. And I know it will help even more. So, again, thanks for that. So, you open the book with the question that your therapist presented, and it's the theme really for the book. It's, before you make any decisions, I want you to ask yourself one question. Am I doing this or not doing this because of fear, obligation, or guilt? So why did that question frustrate you initially? That's kind of the feeling that I get from the book, is that you're like, oh, seriously?
Yeah. Well, I think in the time I was just irritated with all things in life. So it was hard for it to frustrate me. But he didn't. What I felt was that he was being condescending to me. I was like, that is not real advice. I think I was walking in looking for a magic pill or a magic meditation or a magic prayer or something that was going to get me over this hump. But it actually, that was the little nugget. I really do feel like, I feel like everyone should go to therapy at some point or another. And I think that's important to tell people that your first therapist is not always the best therapist for you. And I truly still believe that he probably wasn't the best therapist for me, and maybe not the best person for the job. But if you can take something good out of every experience, I mean, every experience is a blessing or a lesson. And so to me, just taking that one little piece of advice and turning it into something was all I really I guess that's all I really needed, was to later just kind of reframe that and say, okay, so I spent that money, I spent that time, now what can I do with it? So
Right. Gotcha. Um, one of the things that I've heard people say is that you can't really live without obligation, like that's impossible, or it seems impossible to escape. So what do you mean when you're talking about that? Frame that for people so they understand what you mean.
yeah, absolutely. So there's a ton of obligations that we can't escape. I do feel like as women, though, we do take on a lot of obligations that we're not called to do. So there are things like, taking care of family. You can't not take care of your kids. you know, you,
Lock it
um,
away someplace.
yeah, you can't really do that. And I understand that. What I want is for people to reframe what obligations look like. So one of the things that I hear often when I'm coaching women is that they're taking care of things that they're kind of inserting themselves or being prideful in their obligations, thinking things like, I'm the only one that can do this the right way. I see this so often, especially with women with young children, or women who travel a lot for work. They will do all the things to make sure it seems like they're not gone. So when I first started traveling for my job, I would leave and I would make all the meals and I would leave all the notes and tell everybody what time bedtime was and where dinner is. And then I would come back and I'd be so frustrated because all the meals that I made were still in the freezer and everybody ate frozen pizza and McDonald's all weekend with that. And it was like, you know what? Everybody was happy and fine. It was this me taking on this role of, I have to do this or things won't go a certain way. Or another example that I like to use is that, you know, there's this obligation that we have to, like, if nobody else is going to do that, I should do it. Right. So this happens a lot with joining organizations or coaching kids' teams or things like that. And I don't feel like we really take a moment to think about, okay, if I'm saying yes to that, what am I saying no to?
Mm-hmm.
And there are obligations I feel that are necessary. So where are the things that you are irreplaceable on? So for example, nobody can tuck your kids in bed at night like you can. Now, can dad do it on some nights? Absolutely. And he should, because there's something about that time with dad that's really special too. But sometimes I think as women, we kind of insert ourselves and say, well, I'll just handle this. This is a mom thing, or this is a woman thing, or I'm the only person who can coach the soccer team. I'm the only person, nobody else is stepping up. So I have to do it. Well, no, you don't. Your kids are going to be just fine if you don't coach the soccer team this year. Maybe they're not even going to play soccer this year. Like maybe there won't be a team. So maybe you're opening up a door for something else for your child to try or to excel in. I think, okay. So one other thing I wanted to say about this, sorry, I'm going to kind of shift gears a little bit, is that I really think that the best filter to put on for those obligations is, if it won't matter in 5 years, then don't spend 5 minutes on it. You know, we've heard that said before. So I think when we worry or we commit ourselves to something, how long is the impact of what we're doing? And how long do you spend, how much energy does it take for you to spend in that time? So, you know, when you think about things like, okay, maybe you're an only child and you're an adult child and you have parents who are ill and you're caring for them. Is that going to matter to you in 5 years? Absolutely.
Right. Right.
Matter. You're never going to regret that time. And it might pull a bunch of energy from you, but what are the obligations that you have that you can let go of so that you don't feel, so that you feel like you can show up in those moments fully and completely energized in yourself and that you won't regret that time.
Yeah. Yeah. And not trying to do everything.
Right.
Yeah. I think that's an important point is stepping away from some things so that you can devote your time and energy to others and not totally deplete yourself. I think that's huge. Yeah. So, yeah, I think that's really good. I think that's really good. We're going to wrap up this intro, and I want to leave us with 2 verses because I think they really tie into some of the things that we talked about and things that we'll set up for the rest of the study. So the first one, we've got Jeremiah 29, 11 through 13. And a lot of people know part of that verse, but maybe not the whole thing. And then we've got John 10:10. So Jeremiah 29, 11 through 13 says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. Then you will call on me and come to me and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart." And then John 10:10, Jesus says, "The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I come that they may have life and have it abundantly." So I think the things that I want us to take away and to think on this week and through this study is that God does have a plan for our lives. And maybe it's not a plan to do everything. Maybe it's a plan to scale back and do one of the things or two of the things and let some of the other things go. But that we find God's plan and God's purpose for us when we seek him with all our heart. I think that's the part people maybe leave out of this verse. They know, that first part, everybody knows, but it's when we seek him intentionally that we find him. And then the idea that Jesus didn't come to give us a normal life. That first chapter about, I don't want to be normal, say no to normal. Jesus didn't come to give us a normal life. He came to give us a life of abundance. And abundance doesn't necessarily have to mean wealth. This is not a, prosperity message here. What I'm saying is we can have an abundance of peace. We can have an abundance of joy when our focus is on him and not on the things that burden us with those fears or guilt or obligations. So is there anything else that you want to add before we wrap this intro video?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of piggyback on what you just said and kind of what we were talking about earlier, which is that God does want the abundance of joy and peace. And I want to just be really clear that that doesn't mean that you are not going to feel fear, obligation, and guilt. I find that there's now I have women coming to me and talking to me and they're like, well, I know what you're going to say. You're going to say that's fear, obligation, and guilt. It's almost like they think I'm going to shame them for that. Oh my goodness. This book is not about feeling shame. It's about, again, that piece of recognition. God built us knowing fully that we were capable of feeling the emotions of fear and obligations and guilt. He knew that, but he also offered us a tool in his word and, in that reliance on him. And we'll talk a little bit more about how to do that in the future videos. But I just think that it's all about that recognition piece and recorrecting your course. And the more you do that, it becomes second nature. Oh my gosh, that's a fear thing. I need to redirect. What do I need to do next? So we're going to learn more about that as we continue in the book.
I kind of think, fear, you're not the boss of me. I mean, that's kind of like you recognize you're not the boss of me.
Yes, I love that.
So as we close out, I just want to, again, thank everybody for participating in this study. We really created it so that we could have a community. I want it to be a place where you feel supported, because I feel like when we, as women, come together, and Lindsey, you talk about this in the book too, when we come together and support each other, we all are stronger. We all can move towards the lives that God has intended for us uniquely and individually. So as we go through the study with the different weeks and you get your updates for during the week, please leave comments on the blog, leave comments on the video, and let us know what your questions are. We want to engage and interact with you. We want to hear from you. So thanks so much for being here. And until next time, here's to living a more courageous and lifted life.